Welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Wednesday, August the 7th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I am finally joined today, as always, by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Ruhnke. JT, you were 17 minutes late to today's episode, a twist on a classic, the Hot Read podcast, often late, but never on your accord. So what excuse do you have for us for your unacceptable tardiness?
I had a doctor's appointment.
Is that right? I also need to warn you, I think your microphone is coming through your computer, not your actual microphone. And see, these are the things that happen when we rush in and we just jump right on the call and we don't do any show prep. Luckily, I'm around to do the show prep for today's show. So. Hello? Does it sound like...
Hello?
You sound like you're in a vacuum. I don't know
either, but hold on.
Okay. Maybe it's just me. Those of you in the comments, if you're watching with us live, let me know. Maybe it's just my headphones thing. Does JT sound normal to you or not? If so, ignore what I'm saying. We've got a big show for folks today, and better late than never because we have a ton to get to. Some breaking news as of the last hour or so in the world of Titans starters. We've got some big picture topics today I can't wait to dive into. Titans' first unofficial depth chart came out. We'll talk about some things on there. It is a game week, JT. The Titans are going to be playing a preseason game this week on Saturday evening. You and I will be there. Some more news about that game here in just a second. Some notes from the two practices over the weekend with some thoughts from, how should I frame this? Some thoughts from Brian Callahan that I thought were interesting during a little fireside chat session with him. And then some camp notes from both you and I, an update on Will Levis and his performance so far, a clarification on a position the Titans have been hyping up recently. A whole lot to get to today. We're going to get to all of that here in just a moment, as well as, by the way, the news with producer JT, a couple of news items for you on today's program as well. The comments seem to think that that he sounds fine. Is this okay? He sounds fine. No, maybe, I don't know. JT, have you troubleshot this? Speak again for me. Now I can't hear you at all. Now you're just muted. So we're going in the wrong direction. I'm going to continue to talk while you work on figuring that out.
How about now? Is now okay?
You sound, there it is.
Wow. Okay.
There it is. That's what it is.
All right, great.
Folks in the comments can confirm whether or not that sounds correct, but that sounds right to me. Okay, I'll let the delay there work. We got a great show started for you here today. Technically there, okay, the comments are confirming you sound all right. Good. So we can move on with our show. Before we get into anything in today's show, we have a couple of housekeeping things and then a big announcement on the show, which we teased on social media and on a football show yesterday when I was filling in for Zach. We need you to subscribe. We need you to like. We need you to follow us on social media, all of those things. And today is the day to do those things, JT, because as we teased, our giveaway today is a ticket to the Titans preseason game in the club level of Nissan Stadium this Saturday evening. Titans 49ers, we have a ticket for you to come and watch the game with the Hot Read podcast. JT and I will be there at the Titans game on Saturday, I think at 7 p.m. Does that sound right for the kickoff?
I believe so, yes.
7 p.m. Saturday night, Titans 49ers. We've got an extra club level ticket that we are giving away. JT, folks can enter this giveaway very easily. What are the two things they need to do in order to be eligible?
Yeah, pretty simple. The first thing is going to be two proofs that you need to show us that you are worthy enough to win this giveaway. The first one is indeed doing the survey for 440 Media, the one that we have been pushing across all of our shows. Doing that survey and showing completion of that survey is the first most important part. And then number two...
Where can they do that survey, JT? Where can I find the link for this survey?
The survey link is in the description of all of our episodes on YouTube. It should be the first big, bold link on all of the descriptions that says, take survey here. And so that is the first part of our giveaway. The second one is being a subscriber to the Hot Read podcast on Broadway Sports Media's YouTube channel. Make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel as well. And if you do those two things and you I believe DM us on @HotReadPod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or send those screenshots to Easton's email, easton@BroadwaySportsMedia.com. You will be entered into the giveaway, and we will do it on Thursday. So
yeah, so Thursday's show, you'll have to tune back in. Again, it is one free ticket. If you are in or around the Nashville area, you can come and watch the preseason game with us. All you have to do are those two simple things. Make sure you're subscribed and take a screenshot of that check mark on the subscription on your YouTube page, and then take a screenshot having already taken the 440 survey. If you have already done the survey, by the way, and you can't find a way to like get picture proof that you did it, if you pinky promise us that you did it, we might allow you to enter the survey. But you know what? Just go do the survey if you haven't, and get a screenshot.
Do it again. Do it again.
Multiple voters over and over would be good for us. And that, no, don't do that. But if you can find a way to prove it, we would love that. And then, yeah, it's easy to reach us. You know how to reach us anywhere on social media at Hot Read Pod, or if you're old school and you want to email me, it's easton@broadwaysportsmedia.com. And if you need a reminder on the terms of this giveaway, we're gonna put out the terms in a post on social media shortly after today's episode. So do that, and then tune back in Thursday to find out if you are the lucky winner of one of those club level seats. By the way, this giveaway was made possible by a very fantastic, very generous, newly minted Hall of Famer of the Hot Read podcast, Chris Cannon, at ccannon995 on Twitter. He was gracious enough to provide the tickets that we are using for this giveaway. So shout out Chris Cannon, a phenomenal A+ Hall of Fame member of the Hot Read podcast listenership. We appreciate you, Chris, for making this possible. Okay. So that is exciting. We're excited about that game on Saturday. Before we get to the game, JT, a number of things to talk about. And first on the docket today, was not going to be the first thing we talked about, but it got pushed up here. The Titans' unofficial depth chart, the first of the year, has come out. Not a whole lot on there that is of note if you've been paying attention. Pretty standard. But the reason we're bringing it up here at the top of the show is because within the last hour, the Titans announced that Sadiq Charles, the Titans' starting right guard, has been moved to the reserve retired list. So he is retiring from the NFL, just turned 25 years old. He was missing from Saturday's practice for personal reasons, according to Brian Callahan. Didn't elaborate on what that was. Figured he just had something he was working out. I don't believe he was there on Sunday either when you were there, JT. Does that sound correct?
He was not. No, he's been absent this entire weekend.
Right. And so now he has decided he's going to be retiring from the NFL. We don't know for sure whether or not those personal things he was handling and missing practice for are the reason why he is no longer in the NFL. But, you know, that's the educated guess here. And so whatever he's got going on, first and foremost, hope that what he's got going on in his life works out for the best and everything is all right in his world. Wishing the best for him. Again, a young guy. Not often you see a guy who's slated to be a starter on an NFL team at 25 years old decide to hang them up. So hopefully that is something that is fine in his world. In terms of the implications for the Titans team, this means it's Dylan Radun's time. I think it's pretty clear that he was the 2. He was the one competing for that job. We've been saying here on the show, we know what left tackle, left guard, and center look like. Those positions are already locked down. We're pretty sure MPF is the heir apparent at the right tackle position. It's his job to lose. The Titans are expecting him to win that job. Nobody else really in his absence at the beginning of training camp had pushed to be a part of that conversation. So right tackle, pretty sure it's MPF. And then relatively sure Sadiq Charles is your right guard with Dylan Radun's on his heels. And I said this yesterday on Twitter before we knew about the retirement, would not shock me if Dylan Radun's ended up winning that job outright by the end of camp, although I think it was an uphill climb. Well, now he is the person in the driver's seat at the right guard position. I don't see, on the Titans unofficial depth chart, which we can go ahead and put up here, JT, I don't see why it would be anybody else. I don't see who do they even have listed as the third right guard here. Lachavius Simmons, whose name I don't know yet how to pronounce. He's not going to be pushing for that position, at least immediately. It's going to be the Dylan Radun show and his job to lose. So a surprising move, one we certainly didn't see coming. Anything to add on that front, JT? I'm not sure there's anything else we can speculate.
Well, I think the reaction from the comments is pretty telling. Just Jacob saying Charles retiring must be the nail in the coffin for Bill Callahan, who is already under a ton of pressure, which is a great callback to the show. Z Dean saying Radens is back on the menu. Joey Turner saying Sadiq got tired of waiting for JT to show up and just retired, which, fair play.
That's fair.
Kenneth asked, now that Charles is out, who do you want the Titans to draft with the first overall pick next year? This is the end of the world to some of you.
That's right.
And Sobros Network Stoney saying, is Ojukwu Mania back on just at right guard? It's an interesting question.
I mean, listen. Never die on the Ojukwu mania, excuse me. Stoney, I want you to keep that going. And in all seriousness, do I think it's Dylan Radin's job right now? Like, will he be running the ones when we're there tomorrow and this week? Yes, I'm pretty certain of that. Is it something that is like locked down and he can't lose it to a guy that maybe plays a different position, but they see as a better swing option at any of the positions? And, let's give him a try. We need a better backup than Latavius Simmons at right guard. No. And so like a guy like Ojukwu, a guy like Jalen Duncan, who's more a traditional tackle than guard, Daniel Brunskill still not out of the picture, by the way. Those guys are still in the conversation for the position. And I think it's still an open competition.
Yeah, and to that point, you bring up an interesting name here that I've been, that has been thrown around. Daniel Brunskill. What is his role? Kind of taking a little backseat to be a backup depth piece now on this team. He was on the offensive line last year. It was not a good line whatsoever. But even for as bad as he may have been last year, it still was one of probably the bright spots on an offensive line. And I know that's not saying much, but he has a lot of experience with the position. I wouldn't rule him out. As Zedine says, any chance we see Brunskill swing back to the guard. Guillerme asking, any chance they sign Levin to be the backup center, thinking of moving Brunskill to right guard where he played last season? Very possible. That's one of the options, I think. I think Stoney also commented here and brings into the picture another option. Cole Spencer, could he get some looks there as well? Very interesting to see what he can do. And then also, I think one dark horse would not rule out getting some snaps in the wake of all of this. Leroy Watson, the guy that Bill Callahan brings in and says, has told us to the media that this guy can play any position on the offensive line. Leroy Watson himself says that he can play anywhere on the line. I wouldn't be surprised if, he was getting looks at the left tackle position this past week and for the past couple of weeks, but I would not be surprised if we see him shift over to the right guard spot and give him a shot. But ultimately, I am with you on the fact that I think it is Dylan Radin's. I think even if you look at it, it may have been Dylan Radin's job from the beginning, even if Sadiq Charles was here. I haven't really been impressed with what Sadiq Charles, unfortunate that he is retiring and cutting it short here, but coming to a new team like the Titans. But, he hasn't shown a lot. Every rep that he went up against Tavondre Sweat, I mean, the dude was getting absolutely bullied and did not inspire confidence on that right side of the line. So I'm not going to say that it's Dylan Radin's job with a bullet, but I wasn't going to rule out either if Sadiq Charles was here that Dylan Radins wasn't going to end up winning the job anyways.
Totally agree. I think we can move on here as we're showing. Again, if you're watching with us on YouTube, we have the Titans unofficial depth chart pulled up. And JT, let's flip over to the defensive side. The Titans made a move on Saturday when you and I were actually spelunking. We were hiking through a cave. I've been planning this cave behind the scenes just with our friends. I've been planning this trip to do this cave in Tennessee that I've done a couple times, and I finally got the boys out there. And then we emerged from the cave where, I don't know if folks know this, not a lot of signal inside of a large cave. We emerge and we've got friends in our group chats texting us like, a Titans, nice move. Like, did they really go and sign somebody while we were in a cave on Sunday, or it's not Saturday, excuse me, on Sunday evening? They did. They went and they got Quandre Diggs, free agent safety, addressing what has been a really concerning position for them. Of course, they went and they grabbed Jamal Adams a couple of weeks ago. But this is the first decision they've made up the spine of that defense, a recurring theme on the show we've been talking about, kind of confusing decisions they've made. This is the first one where I think they really have addressed a serious need, both in terms of starting talent and depth. Quandre Diggs comes in, I think, as your new starter alongside Amani Hooker. I know on the depth chart here, they have Amani Hooker and Jamal Adams listed side by side. Of course, Jamal Adams, we've not really seen much of him at practice. Didn't practice the last two times the Titans were out there. Not sure what his situation is right now. But I think that in the next edition of this depth chart, you will see Quandre Diggs listed alongside Amani Hooker. For Diggs' part, just a little bit of background on him and Jamal Adams, a couple of former Seahawk teammates. So the Titans kind of just transplanted that safety room into theirs this offseason, it turns out. They signed him for a $3 million base salary, which can be ramped up to $5 million based on playing time and performance incentives. It's a 1-year deal worth, again, up to $5 million. Apparently, according to our buddy Teron Davenport, the Titans were first offering him a contract a little bit before they signed Jamal Adams, just in sense of a timeline there. It's been a couple of weeks they've been talking with him. In terms of career stats, 24 career interceptions, 15 of those have come in the last 4 years, which is sixth amongst all active players over that time period. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler, went in 3 of the last 4 years. So not last year, but the 3 previous in 21, 22, and 23. He was a Pro Bowl safety. Very, very reliable player. And this is the number one thing I think for the Titans. He has not missed a single game in the last 4 seasons, 0 missed starts. So reliable as they come, which they desperately need in a room where Jamal Adams and Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden, all 3 have pretty significant injury and playing time concerns. So they've now got a guy that, historically speaking, knock on wood, they can rely on to at least be healthy and stay in the game. Now, the caveat here, why, if he's this good player, multiple-time Pro Bowler, been doing a lot in the past couple of years, why, Easton, was he available for $3 million in free agency on August 4th? Well, 2 reasons. 1, he's 31 years old. He's an aging player. And 2, last season wasn't a very good player. Bad stats, bad year for him. Certainly not living up to the Pro Bowl caliber of the previous 3 seasons. And I think a lot of teams see him as an expensive aging player, or saw him throughout free agency as an expensive aging player that's coming off of a bad season. And at age 31, after 3 Pro Bowl seasons, then you have a really bad one. Is that a sign of the cliff? Is it finally come for you? And as I've been digging into his season with the Seahawks last year, JT, I'm curious if you have seen any of this as well. I think that there is a little bit of nuance that's necessary to understanding why he had a bad year. People that have done deep dives that I've been reading and watching their videos on Quandre Diggs, trying to get an understanding, get up to speed on what his year was like last year. It seems like a big explanation for why he wasn't as good as folks would hope is because of the surroundings in that defense, the things that he was dealing with. Some of the pictures that they were showing to offenses, just weird landmarks in terms of a defense for a safety. I don't see from the tape that I've watched, which is not comprehensive so far by any means, but from what I've seen, I don't see an athletic drop off for a 31-year-old. I think he still has the goods in that regard. I just think it was a little bit, and my comparison on a football show yesterday was, I think Titans fans will remember at the end of Kevin Byard's run here in Tennessee, there were times when it felt like his box score wasn't very reflective of the ability that he still possessed, that there were times that there was some babysitting going on and maybe too much being asked of him. And so it felt like when you looked at the PFF score or the box score, it was unfairly knocking Kevin Byard and his abilities. I think there's a little bit of that to be had with Quandre Diggs. Now, is that all of it? No, I don't think so. I do think at 31 years old, he's a declining player. He is not getting better than he has been in the past. But I do think that last year on paper was not a complete picture of the player that he still can be.
Yeah, I think to your point, I mean, as much as you want to say Kevin Byard, a little bit of babysitting back there, you have to also remember he goes to the Eagles and looks very much like a shell of his former self. So could that be the same thing here with the Titans? Very possible. However, I think that you have to also consider the fact that the Titans secondary unit is totally different than what a safety in this defense has had to do in years past. I think bringing in a Quandre Diggs and a Jamal Adams is to not bringing in both those guys is to not get the player that they once were, but to use them in their specific roles that they can play with the safety. Jamal Adams being more of that guy who sits in the box and is able to blitz and get after the quarterback. Quandre Diggs, a little bit more patient and knowledgeable of the way he sees the field and his ability to both, pick up wide receivers downfield, but also stop the run as well. These are guys who you're not trying to ask too much of them. I think this is definitely a guy who you are going to have play a specific role, and you're not going to ask much more of him, considering the guys that they have at the outside and at the nickel. These are guys that in this Denard Wilson defense, you look at a guy like Kyle Hamilton last year for the Ravens, fantastic player, but they have him in a designed role. It's not like he's all over the field. He makes his best plays when he's playing his role. And I think that's what you're bringing a Quandre Diggs and a Jamal Adams into this defense to do. And so you can talk about the drop off. I think, being that old, that's where that price comes in. But also I don't think the expectations for him should be a Quandre Diggs that we saw at 27. I think the expectations is that this is for my money's worth, probably a upgrade at the position right now. And Elijah Molden, I think, still has a lot to prove. I think he can prove that this year, but I think this also shores up that defense so nice, and you can breathe a little bit easier, I think, now looking at the depth chart.
I think that's 100% where I am. That's the bottom line, right? Does this raise the overall talent of that safety room pretty significantly, as well as the depth? Yeah, it absolutely does. Is it reasonable to expect a return to Pro Bowl form for Sadiq Charles, for Quandre Diggs this year? I don't think so. I've seen some folks say he's the best safety on the Titans roster right now. I don't think I believe that. I think Amani Hooker still is. At best, I would say Amani Hooker and Quandre Diggs are comparable talents. I think Amani Hooker is an underrated player still by many Titans fans. And I think this year is a year that he has the potential to really prove himself with a lot more help around him back there in the secondary. Again, able to play his game and not have to spread himself too thin, as long as he can stay healthy again, knock on wood. So I think that, again, those are your two starters. I think that they are at best equivalent talents. And my expectation for Diggs this year, I think the reasonable expectation is league average. The league average safety, a 16th to 32nd best safety in the league, somewhere in there. And he's going to be playing strong safety. Last year with the Seahawks, over 1,000 of his snaps were at strong safety, very rarely in the box or in the slot. I think to your point, it's going to allow guys like Jamal Adams to fit better into a designed role and not have to play, you talk about playing in the box in the slot, push Jamal up there, have him do that. Let him be kind of like a Kenneth Murray, Jack Gibbons style player on this team who's just a headhunter, an explosive trigger getting upfield and affecting the quarterback, getting after the running back for tackles for loss, those things that he does really well. So I think it's a good ad, and I don't want people to go too overboard with him as an individual player. However, I do think it's fair to start bringing into question just how good this Titans secondary is. And with him raising the floor so dramatically of this safety room to, again, I think league average expectations for this safety room, just fine. Not a problem for you. Not going to win you games either. You stack on top of it a phenomenal group of cornerbacks, both in top line talent and in depth. JT, is this the best secondary in the entire NFL on paper? I think it's a question we have to be asking. And I've seen folks say that the Titans now have the best secondary in the NFL. That is a bold claim, and I think it bears some investigation. Let's look into that a little bit. When you think about the best secondaries in the NFL, and it's hard to quantify this, right? Is it based on PFF scores, based on advanced analytics? You're going to Warren Sharp's website to try to figure this out. Is it based on guys, the age and trajectory of their careers? It's kind of, there's no way to definitively say this. It's kind of a vibes thing. You have to take all those things into account. But you think about the Jets, obviously, with the teams that have the best cornerbacks and some depth. The Jets come to mind. The Niners are up there.
Ravens, I think are very much up there. You can
Ravens, Dolphins, Browns come to mind.
If you want to play, if you want
a younger group,
yeah, I was going to say if you want to play the young card, the potential that the Eagles now have with both Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, I think that could also be in there. But from a veteran standpoint, I think the Titans are up there with both the Ravens and the 49ers, like on paper. Like this is one of those. I think I think they are on paper solidified as a top 3 with a chance to be the number 1.
Well, so let's put a finer point on that because fans don't like to just hear they're up there. Let's try to figure out what we think we're comfortable saying. Are they the best? Are they top 3? Are they at least top 5? So we'll start with the Jets, right? They returned 4 starters this year. You've got Sauce Gardner, obviously, at the top of the list. Michael Carter, the second, and DJ Reed are both very strong cornerbacks as well. And they get back Chuck Clark off of injury after last year. So with those 4, I'm not comfortable saying the Titans. Those are just their corners, by the way, but that's the entire group. It's the entire secondary we're considering in this conversation. I am not ready to say that they have a better secondary than the Jets. I think they could, but I don't think it's definitively better. So, okay, they're top 2. Well, let's look at the Niners. You got Charvarius Ward, Isaac Yodom. I don't know. There's some younger players on this team. They've got good depth. I think better depth than the Titans have. They've got, I don't think it's necessarily definitively better. So I'd actually put the Titans above the Niners, I think, just looking at it here. And I came into this exercise not having made up my mind, so I'm kind of doing this in real time. I don't know. Would you put the Niners above the Titans in terms of secondary?
I think it's pretty close. Like, okay. I think there are 5 teams in the discussion. I think for top 5, they're bona fide top 5. Okay. And then you can kind of, I think the Jets are 1. I think they have the best secondary group, bar none. I think so. I think it's Jets. I would say the Ravens are up there for sure. The Titans are in this conversation. The 49ers, and then your last one. There's a lot of teams, but I do think that there's so many. Yeah, I think for my money, based on this is just going to be my personal preference. I think the Eagles are probably a top 5 unit with the young talent that they have.
Right. And that's more of a projection on your part, yes. Right? I mean, that's a projection, but I don't begrudge you that. The Ravens are they lean on their safeties so much, right? It's Marlon Humphrey, it's Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, and then they add Nate Wiggins in the draft in the first round this year. That's going to be a good group. I do think that is a top 3, top 5 conversation group. I think the Browns are kind of underrated in this conversation because Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson.
As I said that with saying the Eagles, the Browns came to mind, and I'm like, they're so underrated, but they probably might, like, they deserve to be in this conversation, I think, as well as a top 5 group. I put the Steelers also with them. Like, they have a feisty group. I think they could also peek into that conversation, but between the Eagles and the Browns, like that's my bona fide 5 or 6. So in saying that, I think Titans are definitely top 5, right? I think top 5.
I was about to say my final answer is they're at least top 5. For my money, they're top 4. I think right now, I think this group is better than the Eagles group. I think in a year from now, we might change our opinion on that. But I think right now they have at least the 4th best group. It's Titans, Browns, Ravens, Jets for my money. I think those are the groups that are the strongest in the league.
Yeah, if I'm going to go, I think I would definitely, if you're going to go top 4, I feel comfortable putting them top 3. If I had to go right now, I would do Jets, Ravens, Titans. I think the Titans are that 3rd one there, beating out the 49ers, barely edging out teams like the Cleveland Browns. And then if you're not looking at like projections,
you have Titans over Browns. Okay,
I do. Yes.
Okay. So for your money, it's Jets, Eagles, Wait, say that again. Jets,
Ravens,
Titans. Yes. Okay. For me,
I think you also have to consider,
I would say Jets, Ravens, Browns, Titans, but we're basically on the same page.
Is it fair to consider the defensive coordinator and what scheme you're rolling out with with the secondary?
That's
and with
part of
Denard, I think definitely, I like what the Browns have done with their defense, but I think Denard brings a whole nother level that even just by, projecting what Roger McCreary could be, or projecting, how Cheeto Awuzie fits into this defense, just kind of projecting those things is L'Jarius Sneed, just going off basically the history of what Denard Wilson's been able to do. You kind of have to give him the benefit of the doubt that he can already come in and be a top 3 secondary group.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so we can move on from that conversation, but I felt like it'd be an interesting one to dive
into. The last
into.
thing I want to say on Quandre Diggs real quick is the fact that next week is going to be the popcorn is going to be, I'm going to be munching the popcorn. Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs basically coming with the Seahawks. Might as well just throw him back on the plane. We'll take him though. After you get off the plane, we're gonna take him. Just get right off. And so that'll be interesting. The matchups that they go up against. What can they kind of hint about that Seahawks offense and what we see from them? How do they fare against those wide receivers and vice versa? I think that's going to be very interesting, as a lot of camps started to get, feisty this week. I'm interested to see if there's any tempers that rise in that instance as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, those two are certainly familiar with defending the wide receivers on the Seattle Seahawks. So should be an interesting one to watch at joint practices next week. Next up on today's to-do list on the show, let's go through some review of the 2 training camp practices the Titans had this weekend. I was there on Saturday. You were there on Sunday. The number one thing for me from Saturday's practice was the Brian Callahan fireside chat that we had with him before practice at 8 o'clock that morning. We sat with Brian Callahan as a media group, and we weren't allowed to have our cameras. This was just a conversational. It was not at the podium. It was him in a chair, us in chairs, just talking with the coach, taking quotes. A cool concept. I like it. We're doing it again tomorrow on Wednesday. I think this is going to be a thing for him. I like this a lot. I'm a fan of this. And 2 quotes from him that I wanted to bring up on today's show. The first is, we already know that Brian Callahan is insanely more forthright with information as compared to his predecessor, Mike Vrabel. For us in the media, that's a very good thing. And I think for fans, that's a really refreshing change of pace. And so when he sits down with us or goes to the podium with us, he often starts out with kind of a State of the Union address, gives us an update on things he knows we're going to ask about and just gets them out of the way, often about how the practice went or something of note in the practice, or guys that aren't going to be out there, injuries, details on the injuries, especially those things Titans used to never give out. Never, ever would you get Mike Vrabel to talk about the injuries of his guys. It's like he signed a HIPAA form on day one and swore an oath that he could never talk about dudes that were hurt on his team. Well, Brian Callahan didn't do that. And so this is a verbatim quote. He sat down with us on Saturday, and this is what he started with. This is what he said. As you guys well know, DeAndre Hopkins will miss a couple weeks. Let's call it several weeks with a knee. Not a surgical issue, so the timeline can vary on those injuries. So it'll be a few weeks probably until he's back and ready to roll. Trayshawn Harrison will miss practice today. He got stepped on. His foot's sore, so he won't be practicing. He's day-to-day. Nicholas Petit-Frere was back yesterday. He'll be back today, so good to have him out here. He's cleared and full to go. So again, just a matter of working back into shape with pads on and everything like that, but he should be a full participant today. Jamal Adams will remain out today. Anthony Kendall will also be out today and should be back sometime next week. And then Sadiq Charles will not be at practice today for personal reasons, so you won't see him today. Other than that, everyone else is ready to roll. That is just music to our ears to have him lay those things out. Never, ever would you have heard anything like that from the previous regime. To have a coach that is this forthright with information, I felt like deserved noting on the show today.
Well, certainly it's a breath of fresh air from certainly what other teams are experiencing. Did you see the one with Jim Harbaugh where they asked about all the injuries that they had? And he said every single time, how's Gus Edwards? He's working through something. How's Ladd McConkey? He's working through something. Literally, he said the same exact thing for every single player. And so, it just kind of, you take it with a grain of salt, and, you kind of, you want to relish in the opportunity that you have here with Brian Callahan and this new regime that, it really is nice to kind of be on the same page with the team. And I think that's, a smart move for a first-year head coach, right? Being able to get out in front of the narratives that maybe people would write about in the Vrabel regime, kind of creating these stories because we can't get information. Now, just having the information, it's easier for us to do our jobs well, and for fans and people alike to kind of get the information and know a little bit more about their team. And so I think it's an interesting new age kind of direction that I think the Brian Callahan and this entire regime is taking, and I like to see it.
I agree. The other quote from the fireside chat with Brian Callahan, as JT apparently breaks his studio.
My mic keeps. Okay? While I was talking there, my mic is just like keeps falling. I don't know. I'll have to fix that later.
You have to tighten some nuts and bolts later.
Yep.
I asked Brian Callahan about the F position, the position on the offensive side of the ball, the skill position labeled F, that a couple of coaches now have talked to us about. and it's been brought up in conversation about a couple of different players. One in particular, the Titans rookie receiver. My brain just broke. Who am I trying to talk about here? Hello? Rookie receiver on the Titans?
Jaquan Jackson.
Jaquan Jackson. Thank you. Too many names today. Jaquan Jackson has been talked about in the F position, and that's something that we've seen in different similar schemes to what Brian Callahan were expecting him to be running, used as kind of a joker adjuster type role. We've talked about it here on the show. Well, here's straight from the source, Brian Callahan talking about the F position, and again, such a fantastic explanation that he gave me. Here it is verbatim. He said, yeah, the F for us is all of our formations are labeled with the Z, with the X, with the F, the H, and then the Y. All of those sort of stay no matter what the personnel grouping is. So the F, the best way to put it for us is that the F is sort of like our adjuster. So he can be a fullback, he can be a tight end, he can be a slot receiver. It makes for simplicity in formations and where they line up. So I can call the same formation in all 4 personnel groupings, and they all know where to align because they know who's the F, who's the Y, who's the X. So it's probably more semantics than it is anything that's super important necessarily, but that's just how we label them so we can get guys lined up. But generally speaking, you're talking receivers. The F is our interior slot receiver. And then you're talking the F in 12 personnel. That's going to be the sort of F move tight end type of guy, the H-back style player, or the second tight end. And then you get into 13 personnel. Obviously, all of those guys are tight ends. So it's just a matter of how you want to deploy that person. So that's probably the best way to answer it for you. It's more of a naming system and lettering system and than it is anything other than that. Such a great explanation on his part, and something that I think is really cool. One, we were correct. It is that kind of joker adjuster role. It's going to be, for my money, and this was the funny thing, JT, I tweeted that out verbatim, and the replies were a bunch of people very confident, like, oh, well, that explains it. The F is pretty much just going to be blank, and fill in the blank. Everybody had a different answer as to who they came away thinking is going to be the F, which is funny. And you're wrong if you think it's going to be one guy, because it's going to be the most passed around position title, I think, of this year. I think the F position is going to be occupied by the most different players on the Tennessee Titans throughout the season, because it is such a versatile role in terms of the scheme moved around so often. I do think you're going to see guys that are in the slot only type of players most often in that position. So yes, it's going to be a lot of Jaquan Jackson. It's going to be a lot of Tyler Boyd. I think you'll see a good bit of DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley. Hopefully, I would like to see some Treylon Burks as the big F type of guy. I think Chig Okonkwo and Josh Whyle will both be that F when it's a tight end guy, especially in that fullback role. I think you'll see Chig Okonkwo fill that role a decent amount. And then, when it's the F on the outside, sometimes I think that it'll be a boundary guy, and you'll see certain guys running speedy clear outs for guys underneath, or just shooting up the sideline and being a go guy. So it's gonna be a really versatile role, and you're gonna see it passed around super often. Not really anything else to say on that topic besides that, JT, but I found that answer really interesting.
Yeah, it was good clarification on top of kind of figuring out what Jaquan Jackson's role has been. I think we both have talked on this show and also on all the shows on 440 with football and other F words and a football show about how much this offense is going to maybe use that F style role in so many different ways that you kind of need that designation because of how complex the offense can be at sometimes. And so I think that was an amazing clarification, and also one of the best answers that I've seen any coach really give. Being able to just talk ball, I think, is refreshing.
Can you even imagine? Can you imagine me asking that question? And
I think Jacob says it perfectly in the comments here. He would have said, "What the F?" to that.
None of your business.
I think that's yes, exactly right. Don't ask that question. But no, I totally agree with you.
Okay, the last thing here in the big picture section of today's show, I wanted to give a little update on Will Levis. And we talked last week about how you asked me this question, JT. How would you evaluate Will Levis so far in camp? And my answer was, it's been fine, but we're going to need to see more from him down the stretch of camp, really separating himself as a player from Malik Willis and from Mason Rudolph in that QB room to prove to me that there's reason for optimism. We came out of OTAs in the spring and we were like, we want to see more from him. We came into training camp saying it's time to see more from him. And last week I said it's time to see more from him. That needs to happen soon. Well, I think this weekend he had 2 really good practices. I think he kind of stepped up in that way. And he, at least the day that I was there, and then it sounds like the day that you were there, he was more of that guy we're looking to see. So that's good news. And I think that's a step in the right direction for fans. But I kind of wanted to, and you and I were discussing this weekend, I wanted to give fans what we think is kind of the sober reality on Will Levis so far, because I've seen folks on social media say, wow, it looks like Will Levis is making huge plays at every practice. This guy's just balling out there. Things are great. If you're not out there, and I'm not saying, well, you got to get out there, or you don't know. I think it's important for those of us that are there to convey that what you see, what makes it to social media, is a skewed representation of what the day looks like. Number one, because anything from Team Period is coming from the Titans themselves. Like that, those videos they show of Will Levis hitting NWI up the sideline and a big bomb pass, his best pass of the day on Saturday. That's coming from the Titans because we aren't allowed to film during that period. So you're only getting the state sanctioned, propaganda from that period. It's only going to be the positive stuff, right? You're occasionally going to see the defense make a big play, but it's not all, what was it in the spring? They posted a picture of somebody picking off Will Levis and they were like hyping up the defense. Yeah, Gibbons. And everybody was like, ooh, you don't want to see Jack Gibbons picking off Will Levis on the timeline. So they don't put out much of that stuff. And my explanation for how Will Levis has looked so far, including this weekend where I thought he was better, is that he is making 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or sometimes more really big, really nice A+ superstar plays. And the rest of it is still a lot of up and down. Is that kind of where you're at on him so far?
There, as many great throws that he's made, he also has some that are overthrows. I mean,
the one for one. Yep.
The chemistry that is still coming along with guys like Calvin Ridley, Treylon Burks getting back in there, Tyler Boyd, NWI, these things down the sideline. As many nice throws as there are as many incomplete. So, like you said right there, it is, you're seeing the good, but you're not seeing the underwhelming, from Will Levis. And I think that's okay to see. You're not going to have amazing plays every single snap. It's just unfortunate that the ones that people are able to see on social media are only the good ones because, well, he's out there with 16 to 17 reps in first team almost every day, with those guys. And so, I would say for right now, he's progressing to where most of those are good looks, but there are 5 or 6 in the day where they are complete overthrows or just, do not have the communication. And I think that's all about, that progress that we want to see in training camp. And I think the biggest thing is that there's going to be no cameras to hide it on come Saturday night when he's up against live reps. And I think that's going to be a big test.
Well, if and when he gets those live reps again, I really hope, as Brian Callahan has kind of alluded so far, that they're going to have the starters out there. And I hope it's for substantive time and not just a drive. That'd be kind of lame. So we will see. The last thing I'll say on it is it bears mentioning. I'm not sure how much it really matters. I'm old enough to remember last year during the preseason, during training camp, where one CJ Stroud was having a really rough time in camp. And, on that first preseason game, I remember us all on social media being like, ooh, he went 1 for 6 and 2 interceptions or whatever it was. That's probably exaggerating, but it was a really bad start. And then he lit the entire league on fire and is ascendant to be the next Patrick Mahomes, according to certain people. So it doesn't necessarily, preseason results does not necessarily indicate future success. Let's just put it that way. It does bear paying attention to, but it's not the end all be all. Okay, some odds and ends from training camp. JT, I know we just wanted to kind of empty our notebooks from the weekend before we move on to the next 2 days of camp that are coming up, Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So my notes, the number one thing for me is I couldn't stop watching Calvin Ridley. This guy moves so different. He is a delight to watch. He's a fantastic practice player, and it compelled me to tweet out something that went a little bit viral in Jacksonville circles. It's the kind of thing you send off and it's going to be talked about in Jacksonville Talk Radio. I actually went on Jacksonville Talk Radio that's airing later tonight, I think, to talk about this. I said, with every passing day of watching Calvin Ridley at Titans camp, the more confident I am that the Jaguars are morons. His usage last season was a fireable offense. They painted his skill set into a very stupid box. This is a player you force the ball at every level of the field. And I stand by that. I think it's true. Before the Titans ever signed him, we were talking on the show about how Calvin Ridley wasn't used last year in a very intelligent way. It was an overly vertical route tree that he was running, and they weren't moving him around the field. It's really static formations and a limited selection of a limited way in which they chose to use him at different levels of the field and starting at different positions. So I think the Titans are going to do a much better job of that. I think Brian Callahan is aware of that and probably watches back the tape from last year and says, I don't know why they used this skill set in the way that they did. I'm not going to box him in like that. We got a clip from Calvin Ridley on Saturday, just him kind of giving an update on both last year not going exactly how he wanted it to, as well as this year so far, him working his butt off and his excitement level going into the season.
Like I said, I've did plenty of seasons in the NFL now. I got a pretty good idea, especially coming off last year, of coming in just in amazing shape and having a great super camp. And the season didn't go exactly how I wanted, but now I got a pretty good idea of how to get myself to the games, get myself to the play the best of Calvin Ridley's ability. And I'm working my ass off, so I mean I better go out there and do what I do.
You would kind of.
Yeah, so that's really all I have to say on Ridley. I think that he's going to be a really special player for this team. Frankly, they need him to be early out of the gate because of the DeAndre Hopkins injury and his potential to miss some time. So I'm really excited to see what they do with him. JT, any thoughts on Ridley before I give a couple of other notes I have?
Yeah, I think it's funny that I'm interested to see how Calvin Ridley is, because every single time we post a clip of Calvin Ridley on any of our social medias, it's just like, this is huge. This is him. This is him. He's going to be great in training camp. And then once the regular season starts, he's not there. And so I think that's a lot of, fans getting burned in their fantasy football leagues, or Jacksonville.
Fantasy is a huge part of it.
I think that is for sure the narrative, but I mean, from a football perspective, I think every day he's out there, he looks fantastic. He still looks, I honestly am starting to believe him that he is only 25 on paper. Like the way he's able to stop in his routes and the ability that he has is impressive for a guy his age. So yeah, I'm excited to see if he can put it all together come regular season.
Another thing I wanted to mention are some more defensive clues as to how this Titans team is going to operate. And I think it's a good idea. If you haven't listened to a football show yesterday, Braden and I had a good conversation about this. I wanted to play this clip from Kenneth Murray, Titans' newest starting linebacker. Well, not newest, just kidding. Cedric Gray exists. Newest veteran starting linebacker. These are 3 answers in a row from him. He's going to talk about how different this Titans defense is from what he did with the Chargers, and then how he feels like his role is different in this scheme. And I kind of follow up that question with, does that difference play to your strengths, in your opinion? Let's roll his answers to those 3 questions.
I
mean, I kind of know what he means. Like, he just wants me to go out there and just cut it loose and not really worried about, making mistakes and, worrying about, different things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's really just allowing me to be able to just, whatever I see, believe what I see, and just go. Because a lot of times, I've made plays in the past off of instincts and things that I've seen pre-snap, and then I've also, missed plays or may have made a tackle, but could have been a TFL based off of just, just fully just trusting myself. And so I feel like, him being able to empower me with that, I study so much and put so much into it. You just want to go out there and just trust what I put in.
How much different is that from what you were asked to do in the past? Do you feel like you have a lot more freedom now?
I just think scheme-wise, the defense is just different compared to what I was asked to do in the past. In the past it was more so like a stack and track, fall back type of deal, and we weren't really based out a lot of pressure. And so I feel like, this Denard scheme, he wants to be aggressive, blitz the backers a lot, come downhill, and so I think it's just a different type of scheme.
Is that exciting to you? Do you feel like that plays to your skill set more?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Me coming downhill, blitzing, getting on backs, getting off the edge, being in the middle, flying around. I think that's what tailors to me. And so for me, I'm just focused on just being aggressive in everything I do.
While I was not a huge proponent of the move for the Titans to go and get Kenneth Murray, I am at the point now where I'm ready to be wrong about it. I'm ready for them to prove me wrong, and they've had nothing but confidence and positive things to say about him so far, the coaching staff. I'm also at the point where I think if they use him correctly, if they put him in a role that plays to his strengths, like he talks about right there, getting downhill and being a heat-seeking missile, I think he can be a good player. I really do. And, you saw when you go back and look at the Chargers tape, a lot of it is it's kind of similar to the way we talk about Jamal Adams. It's like in coverage, it's just such a liability. But man, can the kid get downhill? Can he get after the quarterback, get after the running back? He can be effective in that way. He's just got to be enabled to not have to think so much and do what he does best, which is be a freaky athlete.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to that conversation we had last week on this Denard Wilson kind of, risk versus reward of the defense, right? It seems that they continue to build this defense around guys who are going to be locked down on their receivers and then just send the house with everybody else and hope it works, like that.
Somebody will get there. Just somebody's got to get there. Yeah.
This
don't care who.
Defense seems like it's predicated on that. And it feels like they are confident in their ability as far as to cover the middle and slot receivers and things like that, to where they can have the confidence to let Kenneth Murray and Jamal Adams and all these guys do what they do best, which is play that role of a heat-seeking missile blitzer kind of package.
Yep. The last thing I have in my notebook from Saturday is that, and this is random, it's just really nice to not have to track the field goals at camp anymore. Last year we were, it was going back and forth, figuring out who hit on a daily basis and from where, and keeping track of, the tally throughout the training camp of who's winning the position. And then they cut the two guys that we were tracking and they bring in another guy and then they trade for a different guy. It was just annoying and a pain. And to just have granddaddy strong legs, Nick Folk, banging them, not worried about, what he makes or misses. I just, ultimate faith in the consummate pro. That's a really nice thing. So that's all I have. JT, I know you have a lot in your notebook. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's start with the wide receiver position. I think, Kenneth brings up an interesting question, and he asks about Cedric Gray and Jaquan Jackson way down on the depth chart, according to this first preliminary one. He says radio even floated the possibility Jackson is a cut candidate. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it does bring up the question now of this conversation we had about the slot receivers and Kyle Phillips and Mason Kinsey specifically, these guys who are fighting for that maybe last roster spot, and now even more so with DeAndre Hopkins down. We've had the conversation about, it looks like Mason Kinsey might be winning this job, and on Sunday, it continued to look like that. His connection with Mason Rudolph was really nice in red zone drills.
The Mason pipeline?
The Mason to Mason pipeline was pretty impressive, along with the Mason Rudolph to Kyle Phillips pipeline as well was proving very fruitful as well in red zone drills. They both had excellent days on Sunday, and so that continues to beg the question, who's going to come out on top? And so we asked Brian Callahan, what have you seen from these slot receivers kind of trying to make a name for themselves in camp here? And here's what he had to say.
Good performance by the interior receivers. I think Tyler is who he is. You guys have all seen his consistency and reliability. And then you got all those guys fighting for another spot, and really they've all made big plays between Mason Kinsey, and I think Kyle Phillips has had a really nice camp so far, and Jaquan is having a good camp as well. He's learning a lot, but he's made some plays when he's had opportunities. So from a depth perspective and a competition perspective, it's fantastic. I think those guys have put a really good camp together.
And so that's very interesting. As Stoney says in the comments, it wouldn't be August without some Mason Kinsey love.
That's right.
I mean, there's one thing to get some Mason Kinsey love, but we've talked about this. Does it feel a little bit different the way that they're using Mason Kinsey right now? Or
does.
From your experience, is this kind of, it feels different the way that they're rolling him out with certain teams. Like it feels like they think they have something in this guy, whether it is Tyke Tolbert finally trying to use him in a different, unique way, or if it's because Brian Callahan thinks that he sees a little, could it be a possibility that he sees a little bit of Trenton Irwin or like a Trent Taylor type player in Mason Kinsey? Is that the reasoning? I don't know.
A compliment if the coach is like, I see a lot of Trenton Irwin in you, kid. I think is that something that you
that's another discussion. I'm kind of just trying to point it out here.
Right.
But
here's the thing, JT. The biggest reason why I know it's different is because it's a different coaching staff, right? Like with Vrabel, no matter what they were doing with him at practice, it had long since become a known quantity. Mason Kinsey king of August, king of preseason game is going to turn into prime Wes Welker. This cat can cook in August. And then they're going to have him as a reserve practice squad player because they like him and he knows the system and he's a good practice player. And, he's a reserve if they need to bring him up due to injury. With the new coaching staff, it's a blank slate, right? There's no preconceived note, or there shouldn't be any preconceived notions. He's able to kind of re-earn his role with a brand new group of fresh minds. And so, again, do I think he's making the team for sure? I don't know, but he keeps getting mentioned and he keeps getting run with to the ones and the twos. And I'm impressed by what I see and how they use him. The other thing I'll say, JT, is I'm more as the days go on, I am more intrigued by this wide receiver sweepstakes of who's going to make it. And as Kenneth mentions, the idea that, Jaquan Jackson, potential cut candidate, that's going too far simply because I do expect him to be the starting returner. But if he's not, like if he does not win the returning job as the wide receiver 6 was what he'd probably be, then he will get cut. Like if you tell me right now he's not the returner for this team, I'm not expecting him to make the team. That being said, I think he's going to make the team because he's going to win that returner spot. And as much love as you've seen for Mason Kinsey, and he talks about Kyle Phillips, he thinks has had a really strong camp so far, which I agree. It's making me wonder if he's going to kind of go different from what we've seen from Brian Callahan coach teams in the past, keeping just 6 receivers. Do they keep a 7th? And I don't know where that, you got to borrow a spot from another position. I don't know which one it would be, but I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility. And this weekend's preseason game is going to be the first big step to showing us who, besides Mason Kinsey and Kyle Phillips, or maybe those 2 guys in particular, who is proving themselves worthy of an extra spot.
As Jacob says, what are our best bets for the Titans-Niners games? Get those Kinsey overs in. Get those Julius Chestnut overs in.
We're going to do a 3-hour preseason edition of the Best Bet Gauntlet on Thursday afternoon. Make sure to be there. It'll be great. It's going to be a good time.
The second clip here is from Mason Rudolph. And while it doesn't really pertain to Will Levis, I thought it brings up an interesting conversation we can have about him. Mason Rudolph was asked about, Brian Callahan's offensive mind and what he's been able to learn from it and kind of the amount of places he's been. How have you learned as a quarterback from him? And here was his response to that.
I, with Coach Callie's experience with pulling things, from what he said from, Peyton in Denver and Matt Stafford in Detroit, and then, obviously Zach Taylor in Cincy. It's a great concoction of, concepts and quarterback-friendly concepts and plays that get the ball in your hands quickly, can go on the field, can do it all, but it all starts with protection, and the guys have been doing a great job up front.
And so I think that brings up an interesting conversation we can have about Brian Callahan. And I was talking to you earlier today about, Mason mentioning how this is kind of a quarterback-friendly offense because of the things he's picked and pulled from the guys he's seen in the past, Peyton Manning, Matt Stafford, Joe Burrow, all these guys. And the way that he uses them, I think we've talked about this offense kind of being like, it's kind of mentioned like, oh, what is he going to learn and kind of put onto Will Levis in these Peyton Manning style offenses or Matt Stafford? I think what we're seeing from Brian Callahan is the creation of a Will Levis offense, something specifically for him. And we talked about in the past, Brian Callahan's ability to play to a quarterback's strength. And I think that really we've been able to see that from Bo Hardegree, Nick Holtz, and Brian Callahan in the way that they roll out the improvement of Malik Willis, maybe finding some untapped potential there, just being able to play to a quarterback's strengths and not necessarily having to define an offense here by a Peyton Manning or Matt Stafford. It could just very well be a new style offense for Will Levis that he is catering exactly to him. And I thought that was an interesting point to bring up.
Well, and it should be. I think it will be. I'm with you on that, and I think it should be. And the most interesting part of that is what's that going to look like? Well, it's going to be a hybrid of things we've seen in the past from him, and I think it's going to be tailored to Will Levis's strengths. So, is that going to be more play action than what we've seen from Callahan in the past? Is it going to be a lot of that shotgun, spread them, send guys down the field, let's work, read 1 to read 2 to read 3? I don't know. I think the best part of this for the Titans, the best news, I think they have the personnel to be flexible and try some different things. And so maybe in the preseason, we get a little taste of that and we see a little bit of what that looks like. We'll be checking that out on Saturday with, again, some lucky fan of the Hot Read podcast gets a free ticket to Sick Club. So how about that? One more thing from you. One more clip?
Yeah, one more video clip to share before we continue our discussion here. Just got to give my boy Jarvis Brownlee Jr. some more love. And we talked all offseason about how there are shades of like a L'Jarius Sneed light in his game. Like he plays the same style. And so we finally asked L'Jarius Sneed, does he have a little bit of you in him? Do you see that? And here was his answer to that question.
He's a very, very great player. He's take coaching. I love his game. I love how he come out every day ready to work. You see it on the field. He's progressing in the right direction.
So he did agree that he sees a lot of his game as well in Jarvis Brownlee Jr. And I think that makes it very exciting for a rookie corner being able to get them in the 5th round like that.
Yeah. Now little pushback. I did see Tyler Boyd stapled Jarvis Brownlee Jr.'s cleats to the field on Saturday. You weren't there for that, but there's a video of it that you can go and see it. But it's okay. They had him run a rep right after, and sometimes you trip over your own 2 feet. Even the best sometimes get a little 2 left feet syndrome. Okay, one last thing, for just one more note before we get to the news and we get out of here. T'Vondre Sweat looking pretty good. Looking pretty good so far. The reason I bring him up is because JC Latham was at the podium on Sunday, I believe, with you guys, and he was very complimentary of T'Vondre Sweat's speed and technique. Says that he's not one of those sloppy bigs who wants to bull rush every play, even though you and I and T'Vondre Sweat fans were reliably informed over the past couple of months. He's just a run-stuffing nose tackle. He's simply Teair Tart. There's nothing more to his game than a Teair Tart. Interesting. So far, that is not what we have seen. We have seen a guy that if you get him in a one-on-one situation, it is over for whoever is on the other end of that equation. So here's one. He's talking about the preseason game. Do they get him in there? And what's he look like against backup linemen on the other team? Could get pretty gross. Could be a real problem for whoever the Porter right guard 2 for the San Francisco 49ers is on Saturday evening.
You got my wheels turning, and I feel like the only people that are going to care about what I'm about to say is going to be me, you, and probably Stoney. And that is, are we gonna get some T'Vondre Sweat versus Dominic Pooney action on Saturday? That could be. Nobody else knows exactly what we're talking about, and nobody's gonna care about.
No, some people know the clip. Some people know.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like if you get him on a one-on-one, he looks in practice like he did when he absolutely destroyed Bo Limmer at the Senior Bowl. Like he looks exactly the same. He's doing the same thing as Stoney says, yeah, buddy, in the chat right there. Z Dean also saying absolutely cannot wait to see T'Vondre Sweat against Aaron Brewer on Monday Night Football.
I've not considered that yet. That's the felony. That's a crime.
That's going to be so much fun as
FBI.
Well. Yeah, I mean,
That's the size mismatch of all time right there.
Yeah, I think that when you look at T'Vondre Sweat, he's doing the same move where he gets underneath the center and the center cannot do anything but just helplessly flail like that and try to put their feet in the ground and try to stop
like the old school Wii. You pick up the Mii's, like you're in your Mii creator, you pick them up by the head and they just that's what it looks like with T'Vondre Sweat.
I mean, I go back to the first thing I ever tweeted about T'Vondre Sweat, which was one of those it was the gif of the little kid in the toy dump truck running over the other kid. It's exactly what it is. It continues to be that, except now it's Lloyd Cushenberry and Sadiq Charles. So it was Sadiq Charles.
Yes. Rest in peace.
But yes, I'm exactly with you there.
Let's pray that he gets some snaps on Saturday. It's going to be a real shame if we don't see any of T'Vondre Sweat. Need him to stay healthy the next 2 practices, and I want to see him out there for at least a couple series. Okay. That's it for the odds and ends from our training camp. Excuse me. Notebooks. One last segment to get to today. The news with producer JT. JT, what have we got to talk about in the news today?
This might send a shiver down your spine because it's going to be the first time I get to say this in a long time, but Uncle Jim bringing back the Britches report here for this Saturday night.
It's like the first leaf falling of the fall. It's like the first snowfall of winter.
The Titans.
Delicious.
The Titans will be decked out in light blue jerseys with white breeches and navy socks in Saturday's preseason opener against the 49ers. Your thoughts on the jerseys that they're wearing?
Oh, excited for the jersey swap. Britches. My brain's broken today. For the Britches report. being back, weekly occurrence now through the rest of the season. Question. I think I missed something here, JT, and maybe you're as confused as I am. I thought at one point the story was the Titans light blue jerseys, which they'll be wearing in this game, going to be like retired and removed as the third option in lieu of the Oilers throwbacks, that those would become the new third option for the Titans. And then we get to this year and they're wearing them as their first preseason fit, and they're also only apparently reportedly going to wear the Oilers unis once this entire season, and it's in like weeks 16, 17. So I'm confused as to what changed and why. Was that your understanding as well at one point, that they were going to be swapped? I thought we talked about this.
You got me there. I have no idea.
You don't know? Okay.
I don't know.
I'm going to go back and find it. I'm pretty sure we talked about it being reported that they were going to make the Oilers the third option and get rid of the light blues. And I think we talked about it on the show, but maybe. I don't know. I'm confused. Apparently not. Apparently that's not the case. So
anyways.
Cool. Anyways.
Yeah. Great to have those back. Another thing that continues to be interesting, Paul Koharski reported last week that Arden Key would be facing was it a 6-game, some sort of suspension. And we talked about another interesting source saying that this is under review. It may not, we don't exactly know what's going to happen. And still, almost a week later, Arden Key has still not been suspended. There's been no confirmation. So I think that's something to keep on everyone's radar, and just interesting to note that. Your take on no confirmation coming down yet from the league?
It's a little weird. I've done a little bit of digging on it though, and it sounds like it's something that takes some time, and that I think it's still going to come down. I'm still confident that this is, as Titans fans, I'm sure would love for this to be a reversal of some kind. I don't think that there's going to be. I think it's just taking some time.
Yeah. And then finally, another interesting thing that you brought up into my attention as well, that the NFL is rolling out facial recognition software for all 32 teams to verify the identity of every person in the stadium, according to an announcement made this week. Big Brother is watching us, I guess. Big Brother is watching us, is watching our NFL habits, I guess, from now on.
Update the shield to put the Illuminati eye right in the middle of the shield, like a watermark. You have to squint to see it. I don't know. There's going to be more news on it, I'm sure, once week 1 rolls around and they start, or maybe this weekend when they start rolling it out. But apparently they've partnered with the NFL, that is, with all 32 teams, have partnered with this software company to facially identify everybody in the stadium. We've known for a while, JT and I and those of us in the media, that it's going to be a thing for us in the media. And it's like it's biometric facial scan to get into the press box now, to get onto the field, to get into the locker room, a whole tech thing that we got a little bit of taste of at the London game last year. And now it's going to be at all NFL games. I didn't realize it was for everybody in the entire stadium, fans as well. I think the primary purpose here is security and safety, but at the cost of pretty significant, like, privacy concerns, and whether or not we've talked about how it may include like using your phone ticket, having like pre-saved data on there that goes to the stadium and to the teams and to the league when you walk into I don't know. I don't want to speculate and say things out of school that aren't true, but I know that they're going to be scanning everybody's face as you go into the stadiums all year this year and going forward. And they're going to have like a 360 view of the entire stadium and be able to identify by the look of your face who's sitting where and what they're doing at all times. So do with that information what you will. Okay, that is the end of today's show. A fun one. JT and I will be at the practices the next 2 days, getting tuned up for the first preseason game of the year, a game that you can attend with JT and I, sitting club level for free. We've got 1 ticket to give away. All you got to do is complete the 440 media survey, which we have linked in the YouTube description, in the podcast description. We'll throw it up on Twitter. JT, let's make sure we get it up there on this post. Up. Perfect. You got to go and fill that out. Help us out. We need you to help us out on that survey with as many responses as we can possibly get. So thank you for doing that. If you've already done it, screenshot that you have done it, and then screenshot that you are a subscriber to Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. 2 very easy things you can do, again, to have a chance on Thursday, the Thursday show at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. We'll be reviewing the 2 days of camp, previewing the Titans preseason game, and figuring out who will be attending the game with us in the club level at the Titans-Niners game on Saturday evening. So super excited for that. Make sure you submit those screenshots to us on social media at Hot Read Pod on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram. Any of those DMs, we'll check all of them. Or if you're old school and you want to email me, it's easton@broadwaysportsmedia.com. easton@broadwaysportsmedia.com. Send in those screenshots to be entered into the raffle for the free ticket. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you Thursday.